Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and June is almost over. We're at the halfway point of the year, everybody, and it's time to discuss the best album releases, EP releases, all that stuff of the year so far. I have reviewed quite a few albums positively, very positively this year, but I have narrowed down my favorites of 2013 so far to 15 major releases, and here they are. Remember, these are in no particular order. The new Kurt Vile album, Wakin on a Pretty Day, the very first LP I heard from Kurt Vile that I loved pretty much from beginning to end, though I wasn't totally crazy about a lot of the lyrics on this album. Kurt's production, Kurt's songwriting, his melodies, and just his really relaxed attitude on this album are intoxicating. They're infectious. They're undeniable. I love the folk rock and psychedelic sounds coming together on this album. It's a really rich, texturally dense album that is just really pleasant to the ear. Seductive. Next, an album from the Australian band The Drones, See Seaweed, easily one of the most dramatic LPs in this band's catalog. They've really distanced themselves from that punk, blues, garage rock roots to put out an album that is really instrumentally refined and just really big, overreaching, very beautiful singer-songwriter type album with some huge instrumentation. Definitely one of the best hardcore releases that you're going to run into this year. This routine is hell's Howl. This album has seriously been on repeat for me over and over and over. Part of that might be because it's so short and it's easy to repeat, but man, are the vocals fierce on this album. The lyrics are top notch in terms of just bringing that really fed up, angry, I'm not taking this anymore kind of attitude, and just the riffs. So badass, so mosh friendly. Loving this album. Maybe a little more now than I did when I originally reviewed it. An album that I loved when I heard it. Took me a little while to get into it, but I still love it. Daft Punk's Random Access Memories. The band really came together with an interesting smorgasbord of sounds from the 70s, from the 80s, whether it be soft rock, disco, what have you. They just weaved all these sounds together into what feels like just a tribute to this musical era that the duo must be really, really fond of, or else they wouldn't go to such great lengths to recreate it so accurately and so passionately. There are a lot of revivalist albums out there right now recapturing older sounds, and for sure this is one of the most exciting I've heard ever. Another pretty big album release, the new Queens of the Stone Age album, like Clockwork, an album that I did not anticipate that I would enjoy so freaking much, but not only are the guitar tones on this album stellar, there's a lot of variety between the tones on this album, and the beats, the grooves are dark, they're moody, but Josh Homme's songwriting on this record, man, did he go, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, the songwriting on this album is legitimately dark, kind of tortured, and the melodies, I mean, they stick out. Queens of the Stone Age really put together one of their most dynamic records ever with this thing. Next, The Knife, Shaking the Habitual. This album brings together African rhythms, Middle Eastern rhythms, electronic music, and some really strange vocals, melodies, and song ideas. And of course, it's all strung out across about 100 minutes of music with a huge ambient interlude in the midst of all these tracks. I love most of the songs on here. It's a challenging album. It's a fun album. It's incredibly colorful, well put together, very dense, and intricate, and yet so loose and raw and visceral and in the moment. I can't stop saying good things about this album. The new Savages album, Silence Yourself, one of the best punk and post-punk records you're going to hear this year. These girls really bring together the darker vibes from this genre, taking a lot of influence from Joy Division, Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, for example, and really hardening them, toughening them up with some badass riffs and some pretty good lyrics. Clipping, Midcity, these guys recently got signed to Sub Pop Records, and off the back of this album, it's no wonder why, because man, are the beats noisy, textured, creative, and just everything that I'm looking for in an adventurous hip-hop beat, really. Though these guys are a little further outside the box than I think some people want to go instrumentally, once this album clicked with me, I loved it. And even though the beats are so out there, David Diggs, the group's lead MC, actually does quite a good job of keeping these songs rooted in a hip-hop tradition with his storytelling, with his flows, with his rhymes. It is one of the most creative hip-hop albums that I think you'll hear this year if you give it a listen. Altar of Plagues, Teeth Glory, and Injury, one of the most creative black metal albums I think you'll run into this year. Though these guys do take a strong black metal influence on this record, they incorporate some industrial sounds, some ambient sounds, some very angular riffs and grooves. And of course the vocals are incredibly tortured as well. The band has sort of drifted away from their longer, more repetitive, somewhat post-rock influenced songwriting style and made an album that I think is way more engaging and exciting. Another great black metal influenced release, Deafheaven's Sunbather, an album that takes all the harshness and aggression of black metal music and transmits it through some really beautiful and sort of uplifting chord progressions and lead melodies. This album is really anthemic, it's moving, it's beautiful. I've never heard something so aggressive just sound so pretty. I guess even though this isn't technically an album, I do want to give this a shout out because it is one of my favorite releases of this year. The 2 EPs that Milo dropped toward the beginning of 2013, honestly, in my opinion, Things That Happen at Day, the first of the 2 EPs, is my hip-hop EP of the year. Though it is still possible that I will like another EP more, I doubt that another EP is going to inch this one out of the way with Milo's creative, eccentric, and very personal rhymes, and the fantastic instrumentals that Riley Lake brought to the table collaborating with Milo on this project. The new Buke and Gase album, General Dome, which brings together elements of industrial music, noise rock and folk rock and indie rock into this really weird, just jagged, weird riff, homemade instrument mess. Looking at this album, trying to figure it out is a lot like just staring into a plate of spaghetti and trying to follow where a single noodle is going. It's impossible. It's never gonna happen. Best bet is just take a fork, jam it in there, roll it all up, eat it, and just try to take it all in at once. And eventually the excitement kind of wears down, but not in a bad way. What Buke and Gase are doing sort of becomes clear. The hard, punchy rhythms, the weird grooves, the distorted, strange sounds coming out of their instruments. It's really colorful, noisy, and yet captivating record too because of the lead vocals from Aaron Dyer, which keeps the song sort of pretty and gives them a strong human quality. And next, a duo that lacks some humanity, but in a good way, the new Autechre album, Exai. Man, really interesting 2-hour double album of electronic pieces that are challenging, out there, difficult, and really just continue this duo's tradition of exploring creative, refreshing electronic sounds. Even though this record is, in a lot of ways, is in the same emotional vein as a lot of their past stuff, I do think these guys are getting better and just sharper when it comes to just spelunking these interesting sounds and assembling them into something that feels cohesive and just engaging. The new Ghostface Killah album with Adrian Younge, 12 Reasons to Die. Ghostface Killah, MC, from the infamous Wu-Tang Clan. This is one of his best records, I think, period. Even though I wish it were longer, even though I wish some of the features were a little bit more ambitious and that Ghost varied up some of his lyrical subjects on this album, I do like the storyline, I like the progression, I love the instrumentals that Adrian Younge brought to the table. This thing is really like watching a B-movie revenge action film or like watching a Quentin Tarantino film. I had nothing but fun listening to this LP. And finally, the new Iceage album, You're Nothing, another kick-ass, punk-ass, punch you in the face kind of record. Not really punch you in the face, it is a pretty apathetic, depressing, and kind of post-punk album. And I love the way that Iceage is able to bring those moments together with some serious, noisy instrumentation, speed, and visceralness to make a record that is just as kick-ass as their full-length debut. I actually like the fact that they vary things up a little bit with some piano, a little weird ambient interlude. The band is definitely getting more ambitious, and I could see them coming out with more records in the future where they sort of stay in the same style but offer up a few changes and different sounds here and there to kind of keep things interesting. All right, those are essentially my 15 favorite major releases of this year. What have your favorites so far this year been? Let me know. Just freaking tell me. Don't hold back. Just say it. Just say it. Don't even worry about what anybody's gonna think. Who cares? Don't care about what I'm gonna think about it. Just say, Anthony, I know you hate all these records, but these are my favorite records. Who cares? Just say it. Forever.